Welcome to the Anthropic Claude Certified Architect Foundations CCA-F Question Bank Series. In this video, I've got 10 exam-style practice questions lined up for you, covering the kind of agentic architecture, Claude code, prompt engineering, tool and MCP design, and context management scenarios you'll see on the real CCA-F exam. Each question comes with the correct answer and a full explanation, including why the wrong options are wrong. Here's how to get the most out of this. When a question appears, pause the video, pick your answer, then hit play to check yourself. Ready? Let's dive in. Question 41. A pipeline extracts invoice totals from scanned text. Running the same document twice sometimes yields different results, which fails an audit requirement for repeatability. What is the appropriate adjustment? The correct answer is A. Set the temperature to 0 or near 0 so the extraction is as deterministic as possible. Extraction has one correct answer and no need for variety, so sampling variability is pure downside. Reducing temperature to 0 makes repeated runs on the same input consistent, which is what the audit requirement asks for. Now, why the other options are wrong? Raise the temperature so the model considers more interpretations of the text is incorrect. This increases run-to-run variation, which is precisely the behavior that is failing the audit. Run the extraction 3 times and take the majority answer is incorrect. Majority voting can improve accuracy, but triples cost and still does not guarantee that 2 separate runs of the pipeline agree. Have the model return the extracted total together with a confidence rating for the reading is incorrect. A confidence rating is itself generated and uncalibrated, and the audit requirement is that 2 runs on the same document agree, which a confidence value does nothing to ensure. Question 42. A summarization endpoint intermittently returns responses that stop mid-sentence. Inspection shows the responses ended because they hit the configured output limit. What is the correct response? The correct answer is B. Raise the maximum output token limit to accommodate the longest legitimate response and detect the length limit stop reason so truncation is handled explicitly rather than passed downstream. The immediate fix is a limit sized for real responses, and the durable fix is checking the stop reason so the application knows when output was cut off instead of silently treating a truncated summary as complete. Now, why the other options are wrong? Ask the model to check its own output length and shorten it if necessary is incorrect. Self-checking length is unreliable, and, more importantly, the responses are being cut off by a configured limit rather than by the model choosing to write too much. Retry the request when the output looks incomplete is incorrect. A retry against the same limit will usually truncate again. Blind retries also double cost without addressing the cause. Instruct the model to be brief and leave the limit unchanged is incorrect. This may help on average, but leaves the underlying limit too low for legitimate long inputs, so the failure recurs on the longest documents. Question 43. 3 teams each wrote their own prompt to extract the same set of fields from contracts. The extracted data is inconsistent across teams and hard to combine. What is the best architectural remedy? The correct answer is C. Standardize on one shared schema and one shared prompt template, versioned centrally with an evaluation set that any change must pass. Inconsistency here is a governance problem, not a prompting one. A single versioned schema and template give one definition of each field, and a shared evaluation set prevents a well-meaning local change from silently shifting the output for everyone. Now, why the other options are wrong? Have each team keep its own prompt but reconcile the outputs in a downstream mapping layer is incorrect. A mapping layer papers over three diverging definitions and must be updated whenever any team edits its prompt. It grows more fragile over time. Choose the largest model for all three teams so their outputs converge is incorrect. A more capable model still follows three different prompts asking for three different things. Capability does not create agreement about field definitions. Let each team continue independently and pick whichever output looks best per contract is incorrect. Per contract manual selection does not scale and leaves the combined dataset without a consistent definition of any field. Question 44. A triage assistant must route messages into one of 12 categories. Some incoming messages genuinely fit none of them, and the model currently forces them into the closest match, producing bad routing. What prompt change is appropriate? The correct answer is D. Add an explicit escape category such as none of the above or needs human review, and instruct the model to use it when no category genuinely applies. When a classification scheme has no legitimate way to express this does not fit, the model must pick a wrong label. Adding an explicit escape option gives it a correct answer for out-of-scope messages and surfaces them for handling. Now, why the other options are wrong? Instruct the model to always choose the closest of the 12 categories is incorrect. This formalizes the failure. Out-of-scope messages remain mislabeled and are routed to teams that cannot act on them. Expand the scheme with additional narrow categories until everything fits is incorrect. Chasing coverage with more categories makes the scheme harder to apply consistently and can never anticipate every out-of-scope message. Add a 12th category defined as whichever of the 11 is closest is incorrect. This dresses up the same forced choice in a new label and still assigns out-of-scope messages to a category that cannot act on them. Question 45. An agent has a tool whose description reads only gets data. The model frequently calls it at the wrong times or omits required arguments. What is the most effective improvement? The correct answer is A. Rewrite the description to state precisely what the tool returns, when it should and should not be used, and what each parameter means. The tool description is the model's only guide to a tool's purpose and boundaries. A specific description covering what it returns, when it applies, when it does not, and the meaning of each parameter is the single highest leverage change for correct tool selection. Now, why the other options are wrong? Move the tool earlier in the tool list so the model notices it first is incorrect. Ordering is not what determines selection. A tool the model does not understand will be misused wherever it appears in the list. Add an instruction to the system prompt telling the model when to call the tool is incorrect. This can help, but scattering a tool's usage rules into the system prompt separates them from the tool itself and does not scale as the number of tools grows. The description is where that knowledge belongs. Make every parameter optional so a call never fails on a missing argument is incorrect. This converts a clear failure into a silent one. The tool runs with missing inputs and returns something wrong rather than telling the model what it forgot. Question 46. An agent is given 30 tools, several of which do nearly the same thing under different names. The model often selects a suboptimal one. What is the best remedy? The correct answer is B. Consolidate the overlapping tools into a smaller set with clearly distinct non-overlapping purposes. Ambiguous selection is usually caused by an ambiguous tool surface. Reducing to a minimal set where each tool has a distinct purpose removes the choice the model was getting wrong in the first place. Now, why the other options are wrong? Keep all 30 tools and add system prompt text ranking, which to prefer is incorrect. A preference ranking in the prompt is a workaround layered over a confusing design, and it must be maintained by hand every time a tool changes. Keep all 30 tools but rename them with numeric prefixes indicating priority is incorrect. Numeric prefixes convey nothing about purpose and do not help the model understand which tool actually suits the task. Give the model only one tool and have it pass a free text command describing what it wants is incorrect. A single free text pass-through gives up schema validation entirely and pushes ambiguity into an unstructured string, which is harder to validate and secure. Question 47. An MCP server needs to expose a developer's local file system to their own Claude code session on the same machine. Which transport is appropriate? The correct answer is C, a local process communicating over standard input and output. For a server running locally alongside the client and serving only that user, a local process over standard I/O is the natural fit. No network exposure, no listening port, and process lifecycle tied to the session. Now, why the other options are wrong? A remote HTTP server behind a public load balancer is incorrect. Exposing a single developer's local file system over a public network endpoint adds significant attack surface and authentication burden for no benefit, since the client is on the same machine. A message queue that the client polls for tool results is incorrect. A queue adds infrastructure and latency for a same machine interaction and is not the transport model MCP defines for local servers. A shared database table used to exchange requests and responses is incorrect. Using a database as an ad hoc transport is indirect, adds a dependency, and bypasses the protocol's defined transports. Question 48. An MCP server needs to expose a set of reference documents that the client can read as context, in addition to actions the model can invoke. Which primitive should be used? The correct answer is D. Expose the documents as resources and the actions as tools. MCP distinguishes resources, contextual data the client can read, from tools, which are callable actions the model can invoke. Reference documents map to resources and actions map to tools. Now, why the other options are wrong? Expose everything as tools, including one tool per document that returns its text, is incorrect. This is technically workable, but conflates data with actions, and it forces the model to make a tool call for content the client could simply read as context. Expose everything as resources, including the actions, is incorrect. Resources are read-only context. They cannot perform actions, so the invocable behavior would be lost. Expose the documents as prompts and the actions as resources is incorrect. This inverts both primitives. Prompts are reusable templates the user can invoke, and resources cannot execute actions. Question 49. An organization is deploying a remote MCP server that exposes per-user data from an internal system. Each user must only see their own records. What is the appropriate authentication design? The correct answer is A. Have the server require a per-user access token obtained through an authorization flow, and enforce authorization server-side on every request using that identity. Per-user data requires a per-user identity carried on each request and checked by the server. Delegated authorization gives the server a verifiable identity, and enforcing scope server-side means the boundary holds regardless of what the client asks for. Now, why the other options are wrong? Ship a single shared service credential with the server configuration for all users is incorrect. A shared credential makes every user indistinguishable to the server, so per-user isolation is impossible, and any user could read anyone's records. Have the model include the user's identity as a parameter in each tool call and trust it is incorrect. A model-supplied identity parameter is trivially wrong or manipulable. Identity must come from an authenticated channel, never from model output. Rely on network-level restrictions so only corporate devices can reach the server is incorrect. Network restrictions limit who can connect but do not distinguish between authenticated users inside the perimeter, so they cannot enforce per-user scoping. Question 50. An agent needs to read customer records to answer questions. It has been given a database tool that can execute arbitrary SQL against the production database. What is the best change? The correct answer is B. Replace the arbitrary SQL tool with narrowly scoped tools for the specific reads required, backed by a read-only account limited to the necessary tables. An arbitrary SQL tool grants far more capability than the task needs, including rights and access to unrelated tables. Narrow tools plus a read-only, table-scoped account bound what can happen even if the model is manipulated. Now, why the other options are wrong. Keep the arbitrary SQL tool, but instruct the model to only ever write select statements is incorrect. The capability to do more remains and is protected only by an instruction, which prompt injection or a model mistake can bypass. Keep the tool, but add a post-tool use check that flags any non-select statement is incorrect. Flagging after execution detects damage that has already occurred. A destructive statement needs to be impossible, not reported. Keep the tool and rely on nightly database backups to recover from mistakes is incorrect. Backups are a recovery mechanism of last resort, not an access control, and restoring production is a severe consequence for a preventable error. And that's a wrap on this video. Nice work getting through those 10 questions. If this helped, you're going to want the complete set. All 390 exam-style questions, with full explanations across all 5 CCA-F domains, are available in my Udemy course, Anthropic Claude Certified Architect Foundations. CCA-F, 6 full practice exams. The link is in the description below. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next video, where I'll walk you through 10 more questions. See you in the next video.